So I'm sure you've answered the question of why can people consume dairy and gluten-containing foods like pastas and breads when they're in, say, Europe and not North America. I know I've got asked this question a few times, and since you're a little more knowledgeable about this, I thought I'd let you explain it.
Thanks for the question, Mike. And it's a question I get asked a lot. So, if I'm specifically talking about wheat products or gluten containing products, there can be differences in gluten content between European flours and North American flours that can impact things who are gluten intolerant or sensitive. Individuals who might have IBS, sometimes they're sensitive to small indigestible carbohydrates called fructans. And so, depending on the preparation method of the bread, so for example, a sourdough, that fermentation happens outside the body rather than inside the body, and a lot of European breads can be from a sourdough ferment, so that can actually be one of the things, and that's actually independent of the gluten, which is an important point. And then the other point is that, there is this brain gut connection. And so a lot of times when people are traveling, whether it be Italy, somewhere else, they're a lot less stressed. And there is a very evidence based demonstrated role that when we're less stressed, we tend to experience less symptoms from the foods that, could be causing issues, such as, say, fructans in wheat products. And now with the dairy, that's another interesting one. I mean, lactose technically would fall under this category of FODMAPs, so these fermentable small carbohydrates, similar to the fructans that I mentioned before in wheat, among other foods. And so, it could be, another, again, related to gut-brain connection. Another thing that it could be, and again, there's different hypotheses, is that some of the way in which the food is prepared. So, for example, we pasteurize cheeses in Canada, and so the temperatures and the ways in which foods are pasteurized, that could potentially kill off or, on the other hand, leave some bacteria that could help break down some of the lactose that could be causing some digestive issues as well. So, could be a little bit related to the processing as far as the dairy goes, could be some gut brain connection, could be related to these so called FODMAPs. So, there's a few different explanations, but it's a great question.
Can you touch on the difference between celiac versus a wheat and gluten intolerance?
So, a celiac is somebody who basically will form an immune response against the gluten protein, which you find in wheat products specifically. So, the only cure for that is a strict gluten free diet. And, the complications of not following that are many. So, increased risk of osteoporosis, chronic low grade inflammation in the gut, and some people don't experience symptoms. So that's really important. And surprisingly, there's an estimated close to 1% of the population that may have celiac, although most are undiagnosed. And then gluten intolerance, sensitivity. Well, so that is basically as it sounds, so just an intolerance rather than an immune related reaction in response to the gluten protein. And there's definitely cases of gluten intolerance. But oftentimes, people can be sensitive to other products in wheat. For example, individuals who have IBS who might be sensitive to so called fructans, these indigestible carbohydrates. So, a lot of times, individuals who experience a lot of bloating and abdominal pain or some other digestive issues, they might cut out gluten and receive and get some relief, but not complete. And a lot of times, some of the times, so, that can be related to these fructans. And so by eliminating wheat, you're not just eliminating the gluten, you're also eliminating these fructans. But these are found in other foods, which is why it's important to kind of tease these details out with a dietitian. But yes, very important. There is a clear distinction between the two. And again, some misconceptions as to what might be causing the symptoms to begin with, the carbohydrate versus the protein.